We interrupt our normal programming tonight to bring you a breaking news report on events that have occurred earlier today in Selma, Alabama. Remember today's date, March 7th, 1965, because this day will forever be known as Bloody Sunday. At least 17 people were injured when around 600 protesters were brutally attacked by police as they marched from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama. Already, it is known that these events will cause President Lyndon B. Johnson to prepare a bill that he will introduce to Congress in about a week. This Voting Rights Act, as it is rumored it will be called, will allow many more African Americans in the South to vote. Also, as 48 million viewers across the nation tune in tonight, many will get a new understanding of the racism in the South, and they will probably feel more sympathy for the civil rights movement. Earlier today, about 600 people began a march from Selma to Montgomery. The march was organized by John Lewis of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, or SNCC, and Hosea Williams of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, or SCLC, in order to promote black voter registration and to protest the death of Jimmy Lee Jackson, an African American who had been killed a few weeks before at a voter registration march in the area. The protesters did not get very far. About a mile into their march, they crossed the Edmund Pettus Bridge. They found a wall of state troopers waiting for them on the other side.
Continue this march, and I'm saying that this is an unlawful assembly. You have to disperse. You are ordered to disperse, go home, or go to your church. This march will not continue.
When the troopers told the marchers to disperse, they simply stood still. The troopers then charged the protesters. Some were on horseback, some had nightsticks, and others had homemade flails and other weapons. Some of the troopers also fired tear gas into the crowd. Meanwhile, many photographers and journalists were filming and taking pictures of the event. That was some of their video footage. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. has made plans to come to Selma after hearing about the events, and he will help organize a second march. Civil rights lawyers are also working to get a federal injunction that would prevent the police from being able to interfere with the march. We will have another special news broadcast in a couple of days once we have more information about what will happen next. Please join us then. Today, Reverend King led a ceremonial march to the Edmund Pettus Bridge and back. Because the protesters do not yet have federal permission to march, they only went as far as the bridge. After this short march, 4 members of the KKK attacked 3 white ministers who had come to Selma to support the march. One of the ministers, James Reeb, is currently in critical condition at a local hospital, and doctors do not expect him to recover. Federal Judge Frank Johnson Jr. ruled on March 17th that the demonstrators would be allowed to march. On March 21st, the protesters left Selma with the protection of federal troops, and when they arrived at the state capitol in Montgomery today, 25,000 people had joined the march. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. gave a speech at the Capitol building today. We have a short segment for you.
He has sounded forth the trumpet that shall never call retreat. He is sifting out the hearts of men before his judgment seat. Oh, be swift, my soul, to answer him. Be jubilant, my feet. Our God is marching on. Glory, hallelujah. Glory, hallelujah.
Today, we will look back on the events that occurred in Selma and Montgomery, Alabama, about 48 years ago. Bloody Sunday changed U.S. history because it directly led to the introduction and passing of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. As a result of this, the percentage of blacks eligible to vote in the U.S. rose from 23% to 61%. This event also showed the nation the racism and brutality towards blacks in some parts of the South and led to more support for the civil rights movement. Today, the 54-mile path that the protesters walked is a National Historic Trail. Also, many of the African Americans who live in the South today can vote because of the events on this tragic Sunday in 1965. The events in Selma have affected Americans across the country. Because of this protest, many African Americans gained the right to vote. Their votes have helped shape the U.S. since the 1960s, and some of the laws, regulations, and policies of the U.S. that affect all of us today were started by African Americans during the Civil Rights Movement. Also, this event opened many Americans' eyes to the horrors of racism, and this is why you and I today are able to live in a predominantly non-racist society. Before we end the show tonight, we would like to show you a recent video of John Lewis, one of the organizers of the march. This concludes our news broadcast for tonight. Have a nice evening.